Welcome back to the Teacher Experience podcast. As always, we are absolutely delighted to have you here. Before we start, just a nice reminder, if you could follow us on Spotify, Amazon and YouTube, we would really appreciate it. And of course, if you are enjoying the podcast so far, please do leave us some comments or any reviews that you might have. First of all, we've got two really fantastic offers for you today. Teacher Card have recently made us their ambassador. That means that we can offer you a 15% discount on their membership. To get that 15% discount, please use the code TC15TE. The second really exciting thing that we can offer you today is from Tidy Think UK, who offer these planners and these notebooks. They're fantastic. We really, really love them. And we can offer you £5 off today using the discount code for £5 off. So today we have Andre and Chris from the Pen Weekly. The Pen Weekly is a fantastic free Wednesday newsletter offering quick dives into the latest in EdTech and cutting edge research. Andre and Chris bring their unique perspectives and insights to help educators stay informed and inspired. Andre and Chris have a wealth of experience in education, technology and consulting, so we are so excited to have them with us today. So welcome, Andre and Chris. To start off with, we would love you to share your what went well from this week and your even better if from this week.
Thanks so much for having us on.
Yeah, thank you. This is great to be here. In terms of what went well, I think one thing that kind of like a milestone that we've crossed recently is we've hit our 22nd issue of the Pen Weekly. And this might sound like a random number, and it is, to be honest with you, but there's actually a few studies, and this just might be like Instagram science, so don't quote me on it, but there's a study somewhere out there that I heard quite a while ago before we started the Pen that was at 21 issues or podcast episodes or whatever it might be, most new projects fail. They stop working by that 21st. Maybe they'll do one, maybe they'll do 10, 15, whatever it might be. It's not working. They don't change. They give up and move on. And so kind of in the back of our heads has always been like that 21st number. We can just make it to 21, then this is real. And we hit 22. So it's officially real.
In all intents and purposes, we won.
This is it. We're going to retire now.
Perfect.
So that's definitely what went well this week. And then if we're understanding this correctly, even better if will be the 23rd issue. And then after that will be the 24th issue. And hopefully a year from now, we'll talk about a much larger number.
Congratulations, guys. That's such great news. I've also heard this statistic, the magic 21 number. Miss Wild and I don't even know how many episodes that we've released now, but I have heard the statistic. People kind of give up on their passion projects. And I think it's when the motivation, the excitement at the start, it all kind of fizzles out. And actually, for anyone listening that does any social media work, any sort of newsletters that you guys do, it is actually a lot of work. Content creation for social media is a lot of work. And I think by the time you get to 21 issues or 21 podcasts for us, that sort of drive kind of just comes over with exhaustion. You obviously, most people are working full time that are initial and new content creators. And I think that drive just kind of fizzles out. So congratulations, that's amazing. I can't wait to delve into this conversation. Obviously, you guys are recording from Canada. We are recording from the UK. So I can't wait to hear all about our similarities and differences within the education system, and then also about the Pen Weekly, which I know our listeners will love to hear. So my first question is for you, Andre. I'd love to know kind of what inspired you to pursue your career in teaching. Our listeners would love to hear a little bit about background about that. And you've worked in kindergarten to 12 and then post-secondary, which is fascinating. Most teachers in the UK only focus on one section of the education system. So I'd love to know about your transition between those different educations as well.
Cool. Well, so I'll say this nicely. Definitely fell into education a little bit by accident. I think this might be a common theme in both of our entire stories, but I fell into it. So the way our school system works here is that our senior level courses, as we were talking about earlier, that kind of grade 12, so around 18 years old, you pick what you want to do for the next 4 years if you're going to pursue more education, whether that be college or university. So if you want to go to university, usually it's a 3 or 4 year bachelor's degree, and then you'll decide again at the end of all of that what you actually want to do career-wise. So I went in for life sciences, so I'm coming from a science background. because I thought that medicine sounds cool, because that's what every student is told, at least here in Canada at that time, is you'll be a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, something cool like that, and you'll be fine. So that's what I did. And at around the second year point, after dabbling in a lot of the medical related fields, I started to doubt that this was what I'm supposed to do with my life. And just by accident started helping out friends and colleagues and other students with a lot of youth projects of the like, and started to realize that in a completely non-braggy way that I'm kind of good at it. And that's not from my own opinion. It's something I used to tell my students as well, is that if other people are telling you you're good at something, that's probably something you should go explore. And so that's what I did. I still kept the science with me until the end of my 4-year degree. And at that end of that 4-year degree, I applied to a bunch of science-based programs, and I applied to as many, we call them Teachers College here, but it's your Bachelor of Education degree or your teaching certificate programs as well. And kind of just threw it out there and said, hopefully I only get into one. And if I don't, then that'll be a different hard conversation to have. And I only got into every teaching program I applied to and nothing else. So I was like, all right, message received, let's move forward. And loved it ever since. It's definitely where I was supposed to be. And stayed in K-12, teaching everything from biology was kind of what I went in for, so senior level biology. So very at home with the two of you. And also did some English and literacy. At the end of my K-12 stint, I finished off by teaching philosophy and religious studies and special education. Actually, there was a lot of special education those last couple of years. So I've kind of been all over the map, and not in a bad way or anything like that. I enjoyed constantly switching up and changing, and wherever the need was to kind of go that way. And so I taught K-12 up until about a couple of years ago now. And in that kind of soft transition between the two, I kind of, again, by accident, started teaching post-secondary. COVID hit, and we were kind of online and more free time, even for educators at that point. Once we kind of got a grip on how to do the online teaching thing. And a position opened up for a degree that I didn't even know existed. And that was in e-training, learning, and design. And at that point, I had just wrapped up my master's in online learning, essentially, not knowing too much about it beforehand. Kind of bled its way into all the other projects in my life. So I thought, this would be fun to teach at a post-secondary level to see what it's like. And for one reason or another, that's where I ended up on a part-time basis, and still kind of help out with the college to this day and age, teaching similar courses. But yeah, that's how I ended up there in that post-secondary world. Very different environment, but just as engaging, for lack of a better term. The students want to be there, but at the same time would rather be somewhere else a lot of the time, especially for those evening classes. And I guess that's not really that different from the latter half of K-12, but a completely different beast in and of itself. And highly, highly recommend it for any teacher who's thinking of dabbling in that post-secondary world.
Thank you for sharing your experience and the kind of journey that you've been on. I think mine was very similar to yours. I definitely naturally was good at science, and it was something I was really passionate about. But I didn't actually become a teacher straight after university. I went and worked in London and was working within the corporate field. And throughout my life, I had been a swimming teacher for a long time. I worked a lot with children. I went to Camp America, explored all of that. And I think similarly to you, people actually said to me, without blowing my own trumpet, I'm really good with kids. And I think it just came naturally to me. And I remember when I was really young, people would always say to me, oh, just do what you're good at. Just do what you're good at. And I think becoming a teacher came so much easier to me than it was me being in this corporate business world. I took to teaching so well compared to being in that world. And I think that was my kind of real first experience of actually, this is kind of what I meant to do. And because I was naturally good at it, I really enjoyed it. And I've never doubted switching from that corporate world to the teaching world. So when you were saying that, I was reflecting my own experience, and I was like, I know exactly what you mean. So thank you for sharing your journey. That's so great to hear.
So this one is for Chris. So we would like to know, what drew you to the field of consultancy, specifically for post-secondary institutions?
Yeah, two things. Andre had a really good intro about himself, but I also want to say that he's extremely humble. He won't let you know that he is my inspiration for the art of the hustle. Just being able to run multiple things at the same time. I love working with Andre. He's such a great guy.
Thank you.
I don't compliment him often, so this is the first.
This is rare. I like it.
It's fun. But being in consulting. So I work for Deloitte in higher education consulting. And maybe I've talked about it before, but I didn't really choose the field. It kind of chose me. When I got into, Deloitte's this incredible beast of a firm, or a global member firms that kind of operate under the Deloitte brand. But I got in initially. Also, maybe I'll backtrack. My undergrad was in computer science, and I got in because I wanted to be a hotshot developer in Silicon Valley, work at all the startups, like that type of hustle mindset. I found very quickly that I have maybe too much personality to be a developer, and I love speaking with people, and I love technology, but I don't necessarily like the coding and being a curmudgeon in a basement. It's not necessarily my style. Not to say that all developers are curmudgeons in basements. Not generalizing, blanket statement here, but when I got into the world of Deloitte, consulting, it's great. I had the chance to work on a project where we were implementing a large-scale ERP solution for a college in Vancouver. I live in Toronto, so it was great because I got to go to Vancouver every now and then. I got to work with some incredible clients, some incredible technology, and even more than that, I really love the team that I'm on, and the people that are just smart and passionate about technology. And even more than that, people that are passionate about education. And I've seen that there's passion with education from teachers that are there. You can kind of tell there are good teachers, and then there's the people that go all the way in. They're fully invested in whatever they do, and those type of people really inspired me. And so I saw that from the business side, but for education itself. Some people were kind of really frustrated with the administration that they would have to deal with, or the technology that they had to work with, or just the day-to-day of students doing X, Y, Z. They wanted to still be in technology, and then they found a way to do that through my company. And so seeing that also really inspired me. And right now, having the chance to do all those things, still work with technology, still work in education, which has really grown on me and inspired me. I feel like I'm at a really good spot to kind of use all those strengths where I am. So I'm being converted more and more every day to education in general, and even more now with the pen. So yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think there are a few things that are stuck out there. I think personally, it's so lovely that Andre is an inspiration to you. I know Miss Dimon and I say a lot of the time that we are also each other's inspiration. And I think it's okay to say sometimes. It's good to give each other that pat on the back and go, do you know what? Thanks. Because life's a little bit better with you. And actually, I can work really hard and be a team with you. So that's awesome. It's nice. It's humble. I like it. So yeah, art of the hustle, I think that's really important. Something really key that I want to sort of touch on is you saying about passion. So it's one of the most infuriating things as a teacher and being in education is working with external companies that understand-ish, but don't have that passion and don't understand your passion for education. And sometimes because they're interested, but the passion's not there, whatever it is, whether it be technology, a certain revision guide, a extracurricular club, whatever it is, if the passion isn't there, quite often the teachers can't get as invested with that company. So really having passion in technology, and when people come into schools and talk about the different type of tech that's available, and have the passion behind them about what will work in your school and why it will work and why the school should invest in those things is so important, because it's what will hook a teacher. And if we can hook the teachers, it will hook the students. And so really, really interesting, and love the point about too much personality to be in tech development. I love that.
So this next question is for both of you. So how has technology impacted your retrospective? This is my dyslexia again. Respective fields. How has technology impacted your respective fields? And what are some of the most significant changes you've seen? I'm sure you guys have had a lot of insight in the last even 10 years. So much has changed, especially with COVID that's happened. So it'd be great to get your insight on that.
Yeah, I can field from a K-12 background and education background. I'd say COVID kind of, at least here in Canada, from an education perspective, accelerated the change that was already kind of there. So we were already using LMSs, Google Classroom was there, and all the other fun ones, D2L. There was some form of technology in the classroom, but it wasn't as, and I can't speak for every classroom, obviously. I'm just going to speak from my personal experience. It was there, but not pushed, if that makes sense. So if a teacher decided, or a school or department decided to want to push it, it would be there, but there was no need. If there wasn't what was working, great. Then why make a change?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. And then COVID hit and it was broken. So we needed to fix it. In about 2 weeks, at least for us here, I think it was a 2-week stint at the start. For teachers, parents, kids, everyone from K to 12 and beyond needed to make that change. And so for the teachers who were already partially utilizing those online tools, it was an easier transition. And even for students who were used to them. And for everyone else, it was quite a hectic month. And then 2 weeks turned into a month, and turned into many months, and here we go. So that was definitely the biggest change. And what's kind of emerged now, not just in K to 12, but also in post-secondary, is this kind of hybrid environment. And I don't mean hybrid in the education world where we're half online, half in person, but I mean hybrid in terms of theories and how we've been going about this, where we still have some of that older mindset. And there's nothing wrong with that, of the old tools that we've been using, the slideshows and the notes and the worksheets. And also this newer element of it of, well, no, now there's ERPs involved as well. And there's different ways of implementing marks and calculating those grades and reporting them, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been this kind of weird revamp that's exciting to be in. And then you throw on top of that, at least I think in the primary space right now, the kids are probably way more technologically advanced than even the freshest teacher that's in that space. And so kind of this, not combatants, but this difference of technological experience is kind of emerging. And it's a really exciting space to be in, to be honest with you. Same thing in post-secondary, the exact same things happening. And then even in a corporate learning standpoint, tools that used to just be tools, like available options you could have used, are now kind of becoming the industry standard. So as a good example of this, if you have to go run a training halfway across the country, you'd hop on a plane with your material, your worksheets, your Bristol boards, whatever it might be, maybe a PowerPoint presentation on a USB stick. You land, you do your thing, you hand out some paper surveys or a Kahoot or something at the end, and you go home. Whereas now it's like, that's very, very rare. Unless something needs to be done that way, it's not. And things like Articulate Storyline, and so many other tools that are out there, Moodle, all these other LMSs that have kind of emerged are now the industry standards, where it's not, okay, how can I go run this training? It's no, how can I design this training to be taken asynchronously? And so it's a difference of tools, it's a difference of mindset. And I throw AI into all of this over the last 12 months, and we have a new revolution on our hands. And I think this is going to happen. Personally, I think this is going to start happening quicker and quicker and quicker as the years go on. But that's definitely, at least from my own experience, how the education space have changed. But if you want to tackle it from your end.
Yeah, technology is, my gosh, how can you keep up in a way? It's actually insane, because coming at it from like the more of the corporate end, as we're helping businesses or schools, but institutions effectively are businesses, and encourage them to think that way is I guess healthy, because okay, now we have, if we're able to use this as a business and say, okay, we need to be setting aside different chunks for technology, different chunks for HR, different chunks for different areas of the business. How can we effectively run things and optimize it in a really good way? And so, we saw that there, for the past 20 to 30 years, there were these huge players in the market when we looked at ERP systems or enterprise resource planning systems. So SAP was a huge one. In North America, you've had Ellucian Banner, you've had a number of other different systems that help run the finance departments of schools. They have procurement, they have accounting, they have HR systems. There's finance, there's HR, but then schools, institutions have the third aspect that is a really heavy thing, which is student information systems. And you have SIS systems that are for K to 12. You have SIS systems for university and colleges, and then SIS systems that are maybe across different learning platforms for corporate as well. That how do you kind of amalgamate everything into one large software? For the most part, everything what we would call would be on-prem or on-premises. So you would have your own data center. All your servers would be there. It would be $100,000 for a server. You plug it in. You have your IT guys come in, hook it up, and everything's working. Hey, presto. But everything's now in the cloud. And so Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they have their own cloud systems. And cloud, you can't really, it's a lot cheaper to run it that way. And so one with cloud operating technologies that have come on board, there's a new system called Workday that does everything. It's all ERPs into one. So HCM, finance, and SIS. And so those are huge emerging players that are coming into the market that are, they're expensive to implement, but they're really effective in that, one, they can provide a whole seamless experience for students, from logging into for the first time to getting their transcripts and their final transcripts, and then applying for jobs, or they can continue and have different touch points. And these systems will have touch points for every point. So even after they're done, they still have their email. They can still log in and get transcripts after, or keep their institutional emails afterwards. And accounting for all those things and then throwing AI on top of the mix is insane. And one of the things I kind of heard that I also work quite deeply with the startup world and a lot of innovation as well. And a lot of companies and a lot of tech providers are making this switch and this pivot to become, we want to be an AI company. We want to be a generative AI company. When that's not it. Like, if you're an education company, stay an education company. If you're a keyboard manufacturer, like, stay a keyboard manufacturer. But how do you include AI in your strategy? That should be, if it's underlying, great, but making sure that it is there, it has a big place, but don't pivot your entire company to then be around AI. AI should work for you, not you working for AI. And so how all that fits into ERP systems, the technologies that each institution uses, is always fascinating, and it's constantly changing, and it's so tough to keep a track of, but you can only fly by the seat of your pants. And so that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me motivated to keep working in it.
Chris, it's so great to get your perspective on technology and education, because immediately all the teachers listening, our brains will go to in the classroom work. Because to us, school, our work is in the classroom. It's so great to get your perspective on it, because we do forget that actually there's so much that goes on in the background within the equivalent of HR. And you mentioned schools being run as businesses. I think that's a good mindset to have, because businesses are designed to be sustainable and long term. And we actually do have a school and education crisis in the UK at the moment. One, because we don't have enough teachers. We have more people leaving the profession than people coming in. We also don't have a lot of people wanting to work in schools doing all the behind the scenes stuff either. So just getting your perspective on technology and how we can streamline that whole process is great. In the UK, we have private schools, which students can pay to go to. And then we have state schools, which are free. So private schools are ran as complete businesses. And I work for a private school, and it's actually been really interesting to work within a school that is a complete business, because it's talked about very differently. Whereas I've previously worked in state schools as well. It's obviously all the money and the funding from the school is being given straight from the government. And in the state school section, money is so tight. And it's really, really hard, because we don't even have enough money for glue sticks in some classrooms, or new chairs and things like that. It's a really tough situation at the moment in the UK. And because working environments are challenging, it doesn't attract staff to stay either. So it's great to get your insight on that. So thank you.
To your point, I had the chance to work. So I worked previously in IT. I've worked in government and public sector, and seeing that, I work for a private company now, and seeing the contrast, it's so true. Because when you're working at a government job, everyone thinks like, oh, they have a cushy government job. And terrible to say in a way, but it's very hard to get rid of those people that are working in a government job. And there are ways that you can hedge against that, and that's excellent. Your job protection is great, but it also kind of lulls you into a sense of security to say, I'm okay. I can put in the minimal amount of work and quiet quitting.
Yeah,
and that's been a huge thing. And I'd still keep my job, and everything would be fine. But when you have a private companies, or when you really have to really fight because there's pressure to perform, there are positives and there are negatives. The positives are you really have like a more concentrated, a more refined essence of whatever I'm going to do, and I have to show it with my absolute best, and I have to do my best. And and for a teacher to show up for her best and to do her best, that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
You want someone that's giving it their all, and then students will also see that and they'll respond in kind. If my manager who's giving his all or her all, I will also respond. I'm going to give my all too. And so that kind of competitiveness, that nature is so needed in every aspect of whatever you're working in.
Well said.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When I transitioned to working for the private sector, the biggest difference it made to my life was workload, because I went from 32 pupils in a class to 16. And workload is a massive factor within the UK education system as to why teachers are leaving. It's always quoted as the number one reason, because it's just become too much. And it's really funny when I speak to people that aren't teachers, because they find it quite shocking that you'd give up 3 months off a year. I don't work for 3 months a year. Yeah. People give up 3 months off a year because of workload. And it's really funny when you speak to non-teachers, because they just don't seem to understand. But yeah, when I transitioned to the private sector, I halved my workload overnight. Show up every day with my best self, because I want to be there. I don't want to go back to my 32 in a class. I want to be here with my 16, the 16 students I can have good relationships with, that I know so well, because I have the time. I've double the time now than I did previously to get to know all my kids. And it just makes my life so much better to have proper relationships with students. And from that, it's easier to teach them because you know them. So thank you for sharing that. I am curious, are schools in Canada embracing AI? Because it's very different between different schools within the UK, whether it's something they're embracing or not. Some people are a little bit scared. Some people are excited about it.
This is actually kind of why we started the Pen Weekly, actually.
Is for that the fear, we'll call it. And I don't mean in like a boogeyman kind of thing, but like the fear of an emerging technology. And every generation, not just in education, it's every field, kind of goes through this, where it's new, it's scary, it's doing too much, it's not doing enough. Where do I actually make use of this? Students are cheating, students aren't cheating, back and forth. It kind of goes round and around. So at least from where we're from here in Toronto, which, by the way, our school system set up very similar to what you just described. We have our private sector, our public school system that's province run or state run, for lack of a better term. And we have a teacher exodus happening here as well. Maybe not to the same degree the UK is, but it's starting here. And one of the main quoted reasons is classroom size, for the almost exact same numbers, to be honest with you, what you quoted there. But in terms of AI, it's reluctantly being utilized. And there's not like an overarching administrative like rule that everyone has to follow. Maybe there are in certain schools, but at least not from the province, or from the state side of things. But there are teachers who are dabbling in it. And I'd say more and more as it shifts away from, the students are using ChatGPT to write their paper, to no, you can use ChatGPT now to help you not write your lesson for you, but to help you write your lesson, to help get those prompts or whatever other those tools might be needed. And so the value is very slowly, I'll say, starting to be seen, but it's there. At the same time, the fear is ever present of not just for academic dishonesty, and we see that a lot in post-secondary as well, but also, is this going to affect, I don't want to say laziness, that's the wrong word, but the idea that a student can answer the question just by typing it into a bot. Where's the critical thinking process that goes along with that? And so kind of teachers, ourselves, and administration and everyone else kind of shifting our mindset into saying, this is a tool that's going to exist. Actually, we wrote one of our Pen Weekly issues on this early on, was that, is this just the calculator? Are we going to look back on this 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 5 years from now, and think this is what teachers thought the calculator was going to be like in the 70s and 80s? It's going to make everybody lazy. We're not going to know how to do math anymore. When in reality now, all of us have a calculator in our pockets that we use quite often, and we still know how to do math. Maybe not as well on pen and paper, but we still utilize the same skills. And so I think the hope is that this turns into that. The fear is always going to be there, though. And I think that comes with every technology in the classroom.
Yeah, but I think a huge thing of what you've just said is down to the leadership teams in schools and down to sort of higher above the leadership team as well. And based on, I suppose, how they respond to AI.
This is for either of you, or you can both answer, I don't mind. But can you please share a memorable moment or achievement in your career that has significantly influenced you?
Do you want to take this, Chris? Or
Yeah. Okay.
That's you.
So we talked a lot about, I guess, like work and a little bit touch on work-life balance and being able to, I guess, really be present for students. I kind of learned that the hard way. I was working on a project, and it was a really tough one for a client, and it just so happened that all my team members were, kind of dropped off, and it kind of, rested on my shoulders to get this deliverable out. And it was right at that time my dad had an open heart surgery, and I was, I was in the waiting room with my family, and like he was in the operation, but you couldn't really do anything but wait. But I was still on my phone, like sending emails out, being like, "Hey, like, can we get this done? Like, can you just review this?" And whether it turns out that it's needed to go for another round of reviews, and whether I had worked in the hospital room or not, my dad went through his surgery. The project still went on. Life really doesn't fall or live and die by one day, or it doesn't really live and die by you taking the time away from whatever is important, and just really making sure that okay, I'm here, I'm passionate, I've got the discipline to get this done. I've got, one of my directors always used to say, okay, we're in education, we're not saving lives here. But at the same time, it's not as immediate, and certainly you can be saving lives in education by depending how you look at it. But making sure that you take the time to be focusing on, okay, this is what is really important. And for teachers and education professionals, like my job here has an impact. But at the same time, in your own personal life, your role as I'm a husband, I'm a father. Your role I'm also a son. But like your role in all these things, it matters, and having that balance, or it's I wouldn't even call it a balancing act, because I guess it's a give and take. And how much do you have, and how much do you give? It depends. Making sure that that's there, making sure that you have enough time with people that you love, enough time for the job that you do, enough time for both of those is always tough. And that's something that has impacted me to say, okay, I need to be making sure I'm setting those boundaries. I need to be making sure I'm setting those expectations to say, okay, this is when I'll be working. This is when I'm not going to be working. This is how I really, and giving my all at those times I set, and making sure that those are communicated well. And so that's something that really impacted me, and really changed how I set expectations and on projects, on teams I'm working on now, and with my buddy Andre. So
darn right.
That was such a wonderful story, and one that's quite similar to mine. At the point in my life where I was trying to decide whether I should stay in this corporate world or move into teaching, my dad had a heart attack, and it was such a big. I didn't realize at the time, but I think that played a big role in my decision to change my career, which ultimately ended up being probably one of the best decisions I did make. But it is quite interesting when that happens to you in that moment. You suddenly realize what's really important. And actually being in that big corporate business world where my whole job was to basically make money for the company because I was in sales, I didn't want to spend my life doing that. And now I have a job where I can impact very small children's lives every day, even if it's a little bit. You don't know how much you impact your kids. For some pupils around the school, just giving that moment in the morning where you say, hi, how was your weekend? That might be the most kindness that they've had that day. And you never know how much of an impact you can have. So thank you for sharing your story. That was so lovely. Right, let's talk about the Pen Weekly. So first question, of course, is going to be, what inspired you guys to start the Pen Weekly? And I want to know how you ensure your content remains relevant and valuable for teachers that obviously will get your newsletter every Wednesday.
Yeah, so I think, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, that we kind of started this after seeing pain points in our own worlds that deal with education. And obviously from completely different perspectives, but even just as students at one point or another. And that's kind of what it came down to, was that the same pain points that we found in our positions, and just talking to other teachers and those who are also in education, it's the same pain points over and over and over again, just with different words around them. And so it's, how can we fix this, but in a way that doesn't take away from that work-life balance, in a way that's not you signing up as a teacher for another complete course that you need to take on top of your teaching duties and marking duties and everything else that goes along with that. Because let's be honest, yes, our teaching hours might be from 8:30 to 3 or whatever it happens to be for your school, but we're working beyond that. Let's be honest with ourselves. And the same thing in corporate world too, where there are certain days where papers need to be marked. And you can't really do that and teach at the same time. So it became born of, well, these are issues that we want solved in our own lives, and we want it solved quickly. We couldn't find a resource out there that did this, or at least did this in the same flavor that we wanted to do it in, and thought, well, we're not the only ones suffering. Let's help. Yeah. Let's help the world that we can. And the influence that comes behind that is, and I think this is at least one of the reasons I became a teacher to begin with, was that, okay, if I've got 30 kids that year, that's 30 minds that I can help form, not in terms of opinions or influence like that, but to teach how to think, to teach how to critically think about the world around them. That's 30 influences that go out and try to make a better place. In high school, we teach subjects. So you times that by 3, okay, 90 kids every few months that you can kind of set out into the world and hopefully make a difference. But at this level, we're not just influencing those 90 kids to try and make a better difference. We're influencing the influencers to make that difference. So now it's hundreds or thousands of readers times their own 90 kids that they can now impact better. And that's hopefully like the overall impact we're hoping to make one day is via that. And the education system is good. It's not a bad thing. And teachers are doing a harder job now than they ever have, arguably. And maybe that's biased because we're in it now, but they're arguably doing a harder job now than they ever have before. It's how can we make you want to be a better teacher in the easiest way possible? And I think that's really what the Penn Weekly was born out of.
Yeah. And our slogan is like, we want to make it easy for you to be a better teacher. Here are the resources. Here's the technology tools. Here's the research behind it. These are proven things that we found that can help you, and want to make sure that you can be that 100% teacher in the classroom.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to, is we want to make it as easy as possible for the teacher's already good. No, we're not trying to fix something that's wrong. We're trying to improve upon in a way that doesn't take away from your daily duties. 5 minutes, I'll be honest, some weeks 6 minutes every Wednesday, you can completely change your classroom. And if we think about the math here, if that's once a week, average teaching year, at least for us here, is about 10 months. That's give or take 40 new technologies at the end of a school year, 40 new educational studies that you would not have known about beforehand that can now impact your school. And then even if only one person per school is interacting with that, they can now spread that to their colleagues. And so trying to make that easy transition between technologies. And not every week is going to hit. And I think this is something that we understand, that for example, this past Wednesday was more focused on literacy. If you don't teach anything dealing with that, which I would argue every course does, but let's say, for example, you're not, you might not get anything out of that, but you might be able to pass that on to a teacher who does involve themselves with that, and we'll get you next week. And this shows in our data too, is our unsubscribe rate is quite low compared to industry standards. And so it tells us that, okay, teachers enjoy this, even if they're not utilizing it every week, they're waiting for the next one when they can. And I think it's been very reassuring to us that maybe we got something here for at least 21 issues, but at least we got something here.
Yeah. And part of it is like, we understand that teachers they've got their lesson plans. They know how they teach. They're not looking for new lesson plans. Like, go to Teachers Pay Teachers maybe if you want. But like, how do you here is the what we need to be delivering. What are the activities that we can be setting up? Like, how do we get that learning through? What ways can we do? Like, I think I was listening to another podcast that from that you guys were talking about. And okay, you have whiteboards that students will lift up, and then they kind of can show their answers. And excellent resources. Okay. And maybe that's something that's physical in the classroom. What can we do with technology? One of the resources that I've been really hoping we can use soon is something called Asgar's Fantasy Map Generator. And I'm a huge fantasy fan. Like, every time you open up this website, it just it's a different map and it'll give you here are the provinces, here are the regions, here's like the topography of the what, like, oh my gosh, like I would love to just, okay, make an assignment. Here are the stories, like here are the, configure it this way. And then how do you get them to think or creatively about whatever, story that you have? Like something like that. Like, okay, what research can we put around that? And then, some teacher somewhere is going to see that and be like, wow, like I can really use this. And I didn't have to do the research for it. I just found like I subscribed to the Pen Weekly. Like I got it. Like this is something I can add in. We're not here to do the work for you. We're here to say, hey, here's this whole plethora. Here's this whole world of technology that you can use to your advantage. And it's something that you're already a good teacher. You already make activities. Here's another thing that you can use in your arsenal. Here's another thing you can use in your repertoire that can really create an impact.
Mm-hmm. And at least from a research side of things, it might be different across the pond. But here it's you do your teacher education, and there is research there. You're writing papers. It's very high level in that sense. And if you choose to do your master's, even better. But outside of that, there's not as much research in the classroom. And for no one's fault, to be honest with you, it really, I think, comes down to a time crunch. There's just not enough time to really do that unless you were passionate about it. And so the papers that we feature, we try to make it as recent as possible. Sometimes we'll grab something that came out last week. Sometimes we'll stretch back a couple years if it's more related to the technology that we're dealing with. But it's this idea that the learning doesn't stop. If we're trying to teach students to love learning, that's essentially what we're doing as teachers, we might as well be doing the same thing for ourselves. And this is the easiest way you can go about it. I'm not saying it should be the only way. If you have other resources, great. Go dive into them.
Send them to us too.
Yeah, send them our way too, so we can share them with other teachers. But if 5 minutes, 6 minutes on a lunch break or in the morning when you're having your coffee or tea before you go to work, that's a small commitment to make, but a large, valuable impact that can come from that. And I think that kind of summarizes why the Pen Weekly exists right now and why we hope it continues to exist.
I will also say that, in education consulting, one of the touchy subjects, especially if you look at higher education, is curriculum. Like no tenured professor is going to want to have a consultant come in and say, you should be teaching this. And they're going to tell you they're going to tell you where you can take your information and put it. But they're going to say, okay, don't touch our curriculum. We know what we're doing. And that's it. But how can we're not going to tell you what to do, but how can we say, this is a really cool idea. Here are all the examples. If you want, it's there. It's an example, take it or leave it. But it's also having that influence to say, this is a really exciting topic that uses recent technologies, that uses recent research, and if you want, it's there, and we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear how you use it in the classroom. We'd love to hear what you do with it. So, yeah,
I think what the Pen Weekly does so well for me is that, like you said, it's 5 to 6 minutes. Because teachers are so busy. Like you said, our contracted hours of 8 till 3, 9 till 3. For me, it's 8 till 4. But we just work so much more than that. And I am personally in a privileged position in terms of time because I don't have children, but I can't imagine being a mum as well and then having to have kids to look after in the evening. Like time would become even more restricted. I already think I am. Wait until that happens. So I actually read the Pen Weekly when I get into bed with a cup of tea in the evening about 9 p.m. because I am a 9 p.m. in bed person. And for me, that's my time. And I know there's so much research. It's like, oh, you shouldn't take your phone to bed. Should leave it outside. I'm not that person. I scroll on my phone in bed for about half an hour and that's when I read it. And for me, that's the best time because I actually have the 6 minutes to spend thinking about it. So that's what I think. I do agree with you. I think that's what the Pen Weekly does so well. You mentioned training in schools. So within the UK, we do have continuing CPD training. I don't know if it's the same, I don't know if it's called the same where you are. But we do have CPD training in schools. From my experience within the state sector, that would mean sitting and listening to a PowerPoint for an hour after a long day at work, probably drinking a cup of tea, and I'm probably getting quite tired at that point, not really listening that much. So just having that 5 to 6 minutes and reading that in your own space at home is so much more powerful than the hour PowerPoint presentation that you're listening to after a long day. Especially when you're in school, I feel like when my day finishes at 4 or 3 previously, I'm so buzzed because the day is so intense. At that point in my day, for me personally, it's not the right time for me to start learning new stuff. I've got the headspace. I've just been teaching A-level. I've just been doing safeguarding issues. It's not the right time for me. So I think why it's so good that it's a newsletter and it's on people's phones is they can access at any point as well. For some people, that might be in the morning. If you get into school early, grab a cup of tea, read the newsletter. In that quiet time that you have on your own, it's 5 minutes. It's so powerful because it's the format that you guys have created. I think our listeners would love to hear kind of the process you go through to making the newsletter. And as scientists, Miss Wild and I would love to know kind of where you get your research from.
Yeah, of course. So every week, obviously, is going to be a little different. And first and foremost, thank you for the compliment, by the way. It's always nice to hear where people are reading it and the impact it's actually making. We see that online. We'll get comments and things like that, or emails come back to us, but it's always nice to hear that yay, there's value.
Yeah. If anyone else reads this in bed, please do let us know. We can send a special edition at some point. Yeah. We'll make sure we're targeting it whatever point in time.
Do an evening edition. Yeah.
Ooh, I like that.
But in terms of how each week is kind of set up, so we have our 3 sections right now that we're dealing with. So we have our Brainy Bits, our tech tool, and our surplus scoop, and 3 kind of individual targets of what we're trying to hit. In a perfect world, they all match with each other. And sometimes we can make that work where news matches with a tech tool, which matches with the research. We can make a nice, tidy package. And in some weeks, that doesn't work. There's a really cool research article that one of us found. And it's like, no, we want to talk about this, even though it has nothing to do with the tech tool. So it's all coming from there. The tech tool itself, I'll start there. It's not just some random tool that we find. We make sure to use it ourselves, or within our teaching communities, there's someone who brought it to us, whether that means someone we personally know in the education world or someone has brought it to our attention online saying, hey, love what you do. This is what I'd love to see featured for other teachers. And then even at that point, we still try it as much as we can to make sure we vet it. Like, okay, this is good. It's not just someone trying to send us sponsored content. Like, this is an actual tool.
We don't want to put snake oil on our podcast.
Exactly.
You know, on the newsletter, excuse me. But yeah,
we want to make sure it actually has some kind of purpose. Then we'll play around with it for a bit. We'll look online to see what other people have done with the tool, other ideas, other lesson plans that have come from it. And we kind of just write from there and edit 100 times after that. But that's where that side is. Surplus Scoop is kind of a little new for us. We're trying to incorporate not news necessarily, because you can get that from your news channel. And we have readership pretty much globally at this point, not just Canada and the States beneath. But we also have some readers, actually quite a few readers in the UK, which is, I think we might have gotten acquainted with each other. Australia is also growing now, parts of Europe. So we're worldwide. So the idea of news doesn't make sense. What's going on in Toronto doesn't always impact what's happening in the UK, for example, or in London. So we're trying to find a balance where it's like, no, these are interesting stories. That's not research. It's not a tech tool, but this is something cool a teacher did around the world, or this is a really neat idea that's not really meant for our newsletter, but hey, you might find this hilarious or interesting or just something fun to pass along. We throw in an education quote there as well, and we try to vary those up too. Yeah. Those are more so just to share with your colleagues. And then, go ahead.
One of the really exciting links that I came up from a recent newsletter was there was a teacher that solved like a 30 or 40-year-old murder case with his students.
By accident.
Yeah. And then they ended up going through the whole tribunal process, and they found they were able to identify the actual the murderer, and yeah, it was an incredible thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so interesting. Like I read it, we wrote it together. It's like, oh my gosh, yes, let's do that. But I've seen a lot of really interesting feedback from that surplus scoop section as well. So the tech, surplus scoop, and the research, how they all come together is really beautiful. And we push it out. So
and then from a research, so for the Brainy Bit, this one's been the interesting one because we want to. This is the kind of brainchild behind it. I think the passion project on my end from it, where it's like, that's what I wanted to see in the education world. And so it's like, how can we push this now? So finding papers that are relevant is first and foremost. So we're not trying to go back to the 1900s or even the early 2000s, unless it's something really, really pertinent and still kind of exemplified today. So we're trying to find recent research. We're trying to find research that's actually relatable to a classroom. What we're finding is that a lot of the papers are geared towards post-secondary because it's easier to run studies with post-secondary students. So sometimes we'll take those papers, we'll find something cool and find a way to still relate it back. But we're trying to keep it K-12 for now. We're trying to also to keep it open source as much as we can. So finding open source papers so that there's not this overarching, not just from a Creative Commons perspective, but like, no, someone paid to have this research done. And that's cool. There's a lot of great research there, don't get me wrong. But we're trying to showcase the open side of this, where it's like, no, this was a teacher who was probably doing their PhD, and this was research that went along with them. They were in the classroom. This was something that they carried out, and its results matter to your classroom right now. Whether that means, for example, last week's our literacy rates globally are dropping massively, and that was from PISA who did that one. And that's like a not-for-profit. I think, I'm not completely sure their structure, but PISA is their testing of it, where we can actually test the entire globe and see how 15-year-olds are performing in science, math, and reading. And it's a scary result that comes from that. And yes, that's newsworthy and all of the like, but it's like, no, what can we actually do with that information now? Okay, the research says literacy rates are dropping. Great. Well, not great, but great. What can we do with that? Here's some strategies. Here's a technology that's related to that might work in your classroom. And so really, it kind of varies every week. If we see a really cool technology, we'll try and match a research piece to it. If we see some cool research come across our way, either by recommendation or just from our constant scouring of all of our sources, Reddit and message boards are great for this too. You can kind of see what the pulse is in the teaching world.
Yeah. The Teachers in Transition subreddit is an excellent way of understanding what's not working and where we can see, okay, what can we really target to engage with people that are experiencing a lot of friction, or a lot of frustration, and say, okay, this is a pain point. Well, what can we do about it? And to your point where you mentioned, okay, we want to make sure things are relatable. So like if we're featuring Anki as like a flashcard app, okay, then we would want to maybe talk to in the surplus group, add a video from Ali Abdal that talks about active recall, and then throw some research in that talks about, okay, here's how active recall actually works, and here's why it's a proven method, and then kind of sandwich everything together and make it make sense.
And then make it a 5-minute read. I mean, honestly, I think that's where most of the time gets spent, because we'll write and it'll be a 15-20-minute read, and it's like, okay, no, now let's boil down what actually needs to be said to teachers this week.
And the thing is, we don't use generative AI to kind of shorten things
to at this point.
Because like, not that we don't use it ourselves for other things, but it's like, okay, we want to make sure that we're actually invested and we're vetted into whatever we're saying, and making sure that that's conveyed through.
We want that personal element to it, because at the end of the day, this is teachers or educators or people in the space talking to other teachers. We're not talking down, we're not talking up. We're at the same level. We want to talk and come across that way as well. We might use generative AI for some ideas some weeks or things like that, like I would in my lesson plans. If you ever ask ChatGPT what teachers hate the most, it's a kind of a funny list that comes out. Not the most valuable for what we're trying to do, but everything is written by us, and essentially I want to say for us. We kind of have ourselves in our head as our audience.
What we would want to, don't have experience in the classroom, but I've been in a classroom, and what would I have wanted my own teacher to have learned, in terms of technology? What would I have wanted to see in high school or in university? So yeah, that's a lot of our perspective comes from that end as well. We just verbally dumped a lot of stuff out there. My gosh, but like, whew.
Now summarize it all into 5 minutes.
Okay. No, I love that. I loved what you finished with as well, because it's something I use in my own teaching, is how would I have liked to have been taught? In secondary school, I was taught science completely on a textbook. Do pages 4 to 8, answer the summary questions, was how I was taught science. And it is so ingrained within me to not teach anything like that. And it's completely changed how I teach, because I hated it so much, which was such a shame because I loved science. So I love that you finished on that. If anyone's listening right now and they think, right, how do I get hold of you guys? How do I access the Pen Weekly? Can you please share how they can do that?
Yeah, so you can subscribe to our newsletter at www.thepenweekly.xyz. We're also on Instagram at The Pen Weekly. And we're very responsive to our DMs and or just email us at hello@thepenweekly.xyz. If you if you have any thoughts or feedback, tell us. We're completely out to lunch. Like, we'd love to hear it. We're always willing to learn and grow. And as we go through our podcast, okay, what's working? Like, did you enjoy that? Did you think the links were good? Were they completely terrible and there's no pertinence to anything? Okay, tell us. We want to make sure that we're giving you the best information. Like, what do you want us to give you or to help with to make you a better teacher, to help you encourage that? Because you're already a good teacher. How do we get you to the best version of yourself in the classroom? And so that's how we're tackling it.
Thank you so much. We do finish every episode on a research bite. It's a tradition on the Teacher Experience podcast. So Chris and Andre, could you please share your research bite for this week?
Yeah. So you want to give yours first because I got two.
This is the research or book that has had a great impact. So for me, being extremely ADHD, I have loved the book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's really helped me develop really good habits, but kind of like stacking them on. There's a part called habit stacking, which is like, if I do X, then Y, then Z, and then it kind of develops a flow. It's terrible when you can't get X right and then everything else is gone. But if you're able to really get your environment right, if you're able to get all those things right to help set you up for success, I love being able to do that. And so James Clear has an excellent website, he's got an excellent blog, and an excellent book, Atomic Habits. Highly recommend.
And for me, it's something that kind of helped me with my teaching, I guess, later on in my K-12 career, was that I found myself reading less education books and surprisingly more like business and self-help books. Because the idea in my head was that, okay, a good salesperson is not just going to sell you something just to make a quick buck. A good salesperson is going to identify what your problem is and then link you up with a product that should fix that. Maybe that's more consulting than salesperson, but
also being able to say, okay, you know what, my product doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
Let me find someone that does. And call a spade a spade.
Exactly.
That's someone that's good at their job and knows what they're doing. They do it well.
And so in my head, it was like, as a teacher, how can I not sell the knowledge, but sell the want to learn the knowledge? And so I found myself reading a lot of those. And so the two that came to my, that I should say helped me the best. One was So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. I think between Atomic Habits, that one, and maybe even Deep Work, that should be like mandatory reading for grade 12 students before they head into, especially if they're going to university or a college environment. Read those, live those. Is something that I used to share with my students. On the end of my teaching career, I'd post like a book list of here's what you can do in your last summer. And those three were always there for that main reason. And then for myself too, it was kind of like, okay, if I'm going to provide value to the world, whether that be in the workplace, whether that be in my familial relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, whatever it might be, what is the value I'm bringing to that? And not to say that you have to have value with everything. No, of course not in a salesperson-y kind of way. But in terms of what skill set are you bringing? What is your talent? What is that thing that everyone is telling you that you're good at that you should now go and foster? And Cal Newport does a great job with that. And I think that's something important for students to learn too, and teachers. You might be teaching math for the last 15 years and think, you know what, I would love to teach something else now. How can I kind of pivot the skills I already have to be the best in that?
Yeah.
And then, sorry, what am I saying?
Sorry, we'll let you finish. I'm gonna let you finish.
And then the second book is one that we have a similar issue here, as I mentioned, in Canada, of a teacher exodus, we'll call it, of teachers leaving. And so the book that I read before I left, and I use the term left to not really, because I'm still there. I'm just in different capacity. But the idea, if you're a teacher right now and you want to leave teaching for whatever that reason might be, whether it be larger classroom sizes, whether it be you want just something new, and that's cool too. The book that kind of solidified it for me was called The Dip by Seth Godin. There we go. And it's a short read. It's like 70 pages. You can do it in an hour. Even if you read slow, you can do it in an hour and a half.
Not with the literacy rates out there right now. I gotta say, let me give it a few days. We'll see. But
either way, it's a short read, and essentially what it is it's a framework that he goes through, and essentially it clarifies that, okay, do you actually want to quit for the right reason, or are you just in a dip right now? And it's just something that you need to kind of figure out the problem first to come out on the other end. And if that's the case, great. Stay in the classroom. Maybe the Pen Weekly can help you enjoy that process a little bit more. But if no, you've done all you can, you've given all you can, it's no longer for you, that's okay too. Here's how you can utilize those skills outside of the classroom or outside of whatever it is. So those two, I think, are the ones that I recommend the most.
Really love Cal Newport for he's done an incredible amount of work for how to be a straight A student. Mm-hmm. When he's a professor at Georgetown University, and he's also done a book called Deep Work, So Good They Can't Ignore You, Digital Minimalism. But So Good They Can't Ignore You has a section called the Passion Hypothesis. And it's like, okay, am I passionate about this? And is this going to make me money? Will I be able to survive on this? And like sometimes those line up and sometimes those don't. And that's okay. Like you don't have to be working in a job that you're passionate about. Well, if you're good at it, maybe you're not passionate about it, but like you can then set this up in such a way that you can be passionate about it on the side, and then eventually work on that maybe until it becomes something that'll come up. but also understand, okay, this is something I'm passionate about. I need to be developing these skills. And then you find that maybe there's a bit of friction. I'm not passionate about it immediately, but soon enough, you're going to get so good at it. One, people can't ignore you, but two, you're going to start developing your own passion about it in the end anyway. And so like in the end, kind of trusting the process, building those habits. And okay, there's a lot of friction. There's a lot of doubt, uncertainty, abrasiveness in a way about what I'm doing right now, but I'm good at it. I can keep going, or I can see myself getting good at it. So really like sticking it out, having that discipline to say, I got this. And then, the dip as well. I've heard you speak a lot about it, and it kind of, okay, I'm in a dip right now. Maybe I'm getting to that point, and it makes a lot of sense. Again, inspiration, man. Andre is the best.
You're too nice. You're the best.
Excuse me, sir.
Chris, Andre, it's been such a pleasure to have you. Everyone that's listening now, please go find the Pen Weekly. You'll absolutely enjoy it. Have a cup of tea if you're from the UK, like I do. Have a read. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners. Have a lovely, lovely week.
Thank you so much, guys.
All the best.